James Delingpole. I don't know how many times I'm saying this, but thank you again for joining me in the trenches.
It's an absolute pleasure. There's no one I would be happier to be with alongside me, fighting the enemy.
Other than your wife.
Well, yeah. No, but I think you'd probably be good at... You come from South Africa, you'd probably be good at dealing with vermin, critters, like rats and stuff, because there's all sorts of stuff out there, isn't there?
We are a lot more streetwise, I think, on average, but that's by design.
Oh, I mean, when you live in a country where you can't go on a long car journey without thinking about making plans, if you break down, how are you going to survive? Yes. It's I mean, that's it, isn't it? It's not just, will the AA man come in 3 hours or 5 hours? No, it's, will I survive?
Yes. And is my gun loaded?
Is my gun loaded? Can you carry guns?
Yes.
Ah. Now you know what? You're suddenly selling South Africa to me. I'd like to be in a country where we could...
I cannot confirm nor deny whether or not I have firearms.
Well, I think if your life depends on it.
I've got a hunting rifle. That I'll say, because I go hunting, as you do also.
Well, by the way, where are you, as a fellow Christian, where are you on killing people? I mean...
well, let's just dive into it.
in self-defense, I mean. Because it's not clear to me what God's position is on this. When he says, thou shalt not kill.
No. I think that's a misinterpretation. So if you're coming from a Christian or biblical perspective, I think the correct interpretation is thou shalt not murder. There's a difference, because remember, wars are also killing. But there were many wars in biblical times that were, shall we say, ordained by God.
Actually, it's true. Murder... God is absolutely rooting for the children of Israel in a lot of these conflicts, and he is killing lots of enemies. So you're right. I see that. And David being a bit of a killer himself.
I mean, if somebody comes into your home and tries to kill your family and you shoot them or you stab them to death or whatever, that is a self-defense. That is not murder, because it's not a preemptive behavior. It is a reactive behavior. And I think any sane person...
What is the word, the Greek word that is used for... You see,
you've caught me off guard.
No, this is the problem, isn't it? I often say that Christianity is the biggest, widest and deepest of all the rabbit holes. Because once you start getting interested in it, once you start getting in it from a sort of... There's a certain kind of Christian. The reason I'm talking about this is because I'm writing a piece about this at the moment. It's bugging me. This is all to do with a podcast I did recently with your friend and mine, William Fink. He's so interesting. But it seems to me that there are roughly two types of, well, lots of different categories of Christian, but I'd say that there's the trust the plan variety. And the trust the plan is the kind that takes it on trust that what his pastor or his minister or his Catholic priest or his Orthodox priest has told him and he's brought up to believe, that is absolutely the correct version. And you cannot deviate from that. It's just everything they know, have been taught, is true and right, and that is what they believe, and they ain't going to change. And then there's those of us who started exploring Christianity from an awake perspective. And we go, what? Hang on a second. There are all these different denominations. The Catholics, by the way, don't consider themselves to be a denomination at all. They consider themselves to be the church, the mother church, and they think everyone else is basically a heretic, and we're all going to burn in hell. So there's that. So you get all these different denominations with wildly different views on all sorts of things. For example, what is the correct number of books to have in the Bible? I mean, that's quite a big deal, isn't it? That different churches have different views on how many books, what books are correct, what books are non-canonical or apocryphal. the churches have different positions on the nature of the Virgin Mary. Is she really the Queen of Heaven, or is that just a kind of borrowing from Babylonian, Sumerian mythology, and so on and so forth? Where am I going with this? I think that if you are curious, you have to approach Christianity with a spirit of adventurousness, light skepticism, respect, obviously, for the different traditions, but at the same time an awareness that someone, somewhere, in fact, quite a lot of people, have got their stuff badly wrong.
Yes, I'll add to what you're saying that it's also about approaching it from, let's say, a realistic or a historical perspective. Because the problem I have found, I don't know if you had this issue growing up, like in church, they become so caught up in what appears to be sort of sensational mysticism, and they don't look at what really actually happened biblically. Like, let's go back 1000 BC. What did the region look like? What were the people doing?
I think one of my favourite insights of his, obviously, I'm biased here, but I like the idea that the children of Israel ended up in what became known as Christendom. And it makes absolute sense to me. Absolute sense. It makes emotional sense. It makes intellectual sense. It puzzles me that you get a certain kind of... A good example of this is C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is often held up to be the model Christian. He's a fantastic Christian apologist. We love him, etc. But when reading his appalling book on the Psalms, it really is one of his more dismal books. And it's clear that C.S. Lewis, this ardent Christian, nevertheless looks at the Psalms as this thing that belongs to the people he considers to be the Jews. The Old Testament thing is not so much a Christian thing. That is not at all my perspective on the Psalms. And when I read the psalmist talking, blessed are the people. What is it? I'm just learning this one about the. Blessed are the people whose God is the Lord Jehovah. Blessed are the folk that he hath chosen to him to be his inheritance. That's Psalm 33. It's fantastic. And I listen to those lines or recite them, and I think, that's me, that is. I am one of the descendants of the children of Israel. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? When you think about, just setting aside the Bible for a moment, historically, we know, for example, that apparently every person in England is of white extraction anyway, is descended from, can claim descendants from Edward III. Because if you go back far enough in history, we're all we all go to the same, I suppose we all go back to Adam and Eve in the end. But you think about how long ago the children of Israel were around. We're talking, a couple of thousand years BC, and or even longer. And the diaspora, the periods where in exile and stuff. Where did they all end up? Is nobody curious about this? There was a remarkable lack of curiosity among Christians.
Yes, that's the point I was making about modern church generally being shallow. It doesn't look at the historicity of Christianity. Now, this is important because you don't have to be a Christian to have this discussion.
Well, of course, this discussion has really been loaded by the issue of Israel. What is Israel?
Well, that is a fundamental issue. It's huge.
It's taken over everything.
Yeah. Yes.
How many Zionist Christians are... There are more Zionist Christians than there are Jewish Zionists, I believe. Isn't that
Jews.
Right? Jews, yeah.
There are more Zionist Christians than there are Jews.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic PSYOP win for the Jews. For the Zionists.
And that's a big part of the history of Christianity, is that it's been psyoped into becoming
co-opted.
Judeo-Christianity. Sorry, co-opted co-opted. It's well, it also is a psyop, I suppose.
Of course it is, yeah.
Yeah, because the idea that Christianity is somehow linked to Judaism is only, the last 150 years anyway, due to Schofield and Darby and the Oxford University promoting this idea, and it's taken hold amazingly.
It's even worse than that. It's even worse than that. The vibe I get from certainly those of a Zionist Christian persuasion is that they feel inferior to Jews. It's like, the Jews are the rock stars of the world because they are literally God's chosen people, whereas we are mere Christians and we're not fit to blah blah blah. You get that, don't you? Which I find extraordinary. I mean, maybe when I was younger, when I was more of a snob, and I used to think like I was born to rule and stuff, and I had that education and etc. But I have to say that since my awakening, I've become. I mean, obviously, I still go fox hunting, but I've become a man of the people. I love everybody. I do. Jews, Christians, Muslims, whatever. We're all God's.
Well, it's not about
God's
that
people.
though. You don't have to add that disclaimer. That's the thing.
No, it's not. It's not even the disclaimer. What I'm saying is, I'm putting in context my absolute abhorrence of the notion that the Jews should be considered to be special, because they ain't.
They're not.
That's what I'm saying.
Not special.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, within the biblical context, they're not special.
Well, of course, it depends on the translation of the word Jew, and whether you think that's the same as the Hebrews and the children of Israel, and you get this complicated mix, don't you, where you've got what the Bible says, but then what the different translations of the Bible says, particularly of key words, and then you get the stuff that's sort of extra biblical, where you have to look at other historians, Josephus or whatever, Tacitus, what even the Assyrian historians tell us about the movements of peoples in those far off times, and you then sort of form a kind of meta-analysis based on the one hand the Bible, on the other hand all the other sources, archaeology, etc., and then you try and form an intelligent view. But you can't just go, well, my particular favoured translation of the Bible says this, and my preferred interpretation is this.
A very important conversation actually is the preservation of Christendom. Why? Because it is intricately linked to the West.
And it also makes sense when you see it in terms of race, which is a very, very difficult topic for a lot of people. I really don't want to offend people. I just think people need to get their priorities sorted. And their priority, everyone's priority, not just kind of shock jocks like you and me, should be the truth. That Jamie Franklin makes this point in his rather good new book, and I've made it a few times as well. That what are the things we should believe in? What should be our guiding principles? I think they're truth, goodness, and beauty. We're naturally drawn to them. They're expressions of God, and I think we are naturally drawn to God. So if you're not being drawn to the truth, you should ask yourself, well, hang on a second, am I doing it right? And the answer is, by the way, no, you're not. You should be able to say these things without fear. The thing that puzzles me about atheists, okay, well, how do you explain how we got here? And they say, well, I've never thought about it, or I don't want to think about it.
The Big Bang,
well, hang on a
James.
second.
Everything exploded out of nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
And is expanding into infinity and also into itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you know what? One of the things I'm really glad about since going down the rabbit hole, I'm so glad that I no longer have to take science seriously. Because what did you read at university, or did you not go?
I did, but I failed.
oh, nice one, mate. No,
I'm a varsity dropout.
Respect.
I've made nothing of my life.
I was really lucky. with my tutor, who he wasn't a professor because he wasn't interested in the kind of the fake titles of the academic system. But he was very good. He taught me how to think. And although I was a normie in those days, nevertheless, I did feel that my mind was honed. And I'm eternally, his name's Peter Conrad, and I'm eternally grateful for him for doing that. But anyway, so I did an English degree, and I remember in the years afterwards, there was all this pressure put on one by the prevailing culture to feel bad about having read an art subject, that it was somehow worth it. You was a bit like the Zionist Christians feel towards the Jews, that they're better. One was encouraged culturally, subtly, to think that the scientists, they're the thing. Oh, the scientists, Newton, Boyle, Hooke, the Royal Society, the experts, they know the science and they know the truth. And wrapped up in this was the idea that, of course, well, things like Darwin was maybe the greatest ever Englishman, because he replaced all that God nonsense with the truth, which was we crawled out of the primordial slime, and we gradually evolved, and we're related to the apes. And I'm so and the idea that one has to try to understand planetary motion, that sometimes we're near and sometimes we're far, and we describe these weird elliptical, impossible things that nobody understands. And now I realise you're not meant to understand them because they're not true. You're just meant to go, oh yeah, that's right, Newton said that and it must be true. It's all rubbish. Anyone who's been in this area for a while becomes familiar with MK Ultra, the CIA's brainwashing program. And we all go, well, that's terrible. Imagine what it's like being one of those MK Ultra victims and waiting for your trigger word to send you off to shoot, to attempt to shoot, to be a patsy shooting JFK or whatever. But actually, everyone, pretty much, has been a victim of this kind of programming. We've been given these information and these buzzwords like Winston Churchill, and you're supposed to go, yeah, bulldog, cigar, Tommy gun, Viva Victory.
He was the hero of World War II, and Hitler was the great Satan.
And Darwin, genius, overturned all that nonsense. Galileo, the hero who took on the primitive belief system of the superstitions of the Catholic Church, and it's all lies. It's all just, or it's very, very heavily tweaked in a particular direction. Everything we're taught is just programming. I went to a party the other day. An English garden party. It was fantastic. There was a marquee, and there was loads and loads of drinks, whatever drink you wanted, and lovely little canapes, and people I wanted to see, and lots of parkland where you could park your car, and it was a dry day because we're having a geoengineered drought at the moment by the powers that be. And rather sadly, my wife was unable to come with me, which meant that I could behave really, really badly. Normally I'd be talking about, I'd be keeping my conversation quite careful in case I got rumbled. But this time every conversation I was just going in and sort of red-pilling everybody and talking about the nonsense. But you're right. Fun though it is to go around talking about, look up, look at what are those lines in the sky? Why do they disperse like that? Are you sure that's what meant to happen? And have you noticed this wind? When did you ever remember wind like this? When did you ever remember it being this dry? This stuff, it's fun doing it, but you realise that you're just basically a gibbering loon to most of them. They don't get it.
Yes, but have you noticed though who tends to be happier?
Oh, we're living in the truth, man. It's great. It's great discovering how awful the world it really is. I mean, it is.
But it's also great discovering how you can not be defeated.
I think absolutely. Absolutely. I tell you what. Do you know what's been really, really in my thoughts more than anything recently? This is the time of the year when the first batch of swallows hatch, or they fly. So the weekend just gone was when the swallows that make their nest every year in the shed opposite the bathroom where I clean my teeth in the morning. So I'm cleaning my teeth, and I look out of the window and I see that the mating pair of swallows get more and more frantic on their entrances and exits, because they've got these little greedy little bastards with their huge beaks to feed, and they're effectively grown-ups, and they should be feeding themselves by now. And then you see them hopping out onto the kind of, we've blocked off the entrance to this shed with a sort of some picket fencing, and they sometimes sit on there for a while, waiting to sort of stretching their wings, waiting to have a go, and then they might make a little foray to a roof, and then back, and then the next day you see them swooping and diving, and I reckon that over the last weekend, the swallow population has quadrupled, because the breeding pairs, now their offspring are up in the air, and with luck we're going to get certainly one more brood. I've seen 3 broods in a season. Well, they're leaving it quite late for the migration south again. But the joy of seeing that matters so much more than what Keir Starmer is doing. And he's doing annoying things, and you just got to kind of laugh it off and focus on what matters.
Yeah, Bob Moran makes a great comment. He says, approach everything as if it's satire.
And he is so right, because it is. It absolutely is. The narratives that we're given, like the one about, have you been following the Lucy Connolly thing? The Lucy Connolly, is she or isn't she? There's this story which is appearing in the papers about this woman called Lucy Connolly. And Lucy Connolly, according to the story being sold to us, tweeted out something about something inflammatory following the Southam? No, not Southam. Was it Southam? The Taylor Swift dance class girls that were allegedly murdered by an immigrant terrorist. I don't believe any of these stories. And allegedly, this woman was put in prison because of an inflammatory tweet, and we're being invited to believe that this is a terrible injustice if this is what actually happened, and if she is in prison, etc., etc. And yes, all these stories should be treated as satire, but also they should be you should always add if it really happened, because I don't trust anything I see in the papers. Anything. We're all so manipulated.
Well, that's what Kid Knightley from Off Guardian says. If you read something in the mainstream media, or even alternative media to a large degree these days, treat it as, by default, as if it's false.
Yeah. Or at the very least, ask yourself how it's been slanted, what agenda it's trying to push, which is normally fairly obvious.
And my friend Nick Hudson also makes a great comment that's sort of overlapping. He says any big event that happens anywhere is either fabricated or entirely false.
That's a sort of version of, I can't remember whether it's Delingpole's first law or Delingpole's second law, but it goes something like, the more you know about something, the less likely it is that it actually happened. So moon landings, we all know about the moon landings. Didn't happen. Lone gunman killing Kennedy, nah. Did not happen. Titanic, hit by an iceberg. Nope. Nah. All these stories. I mean, the Charge of the Light Brigade. I wonder what actually happened at the Charge of the Light Brigade. Maybe nobody died. No horses were killed. I don't know.
why is everything fabricated?
Oh, that's easy. That's really easy. Because the world is run, and always has been run, by a very, very, very small number of people. We could take them out any time, because there's gazillions of us, billions of us certainly, and there's only few thousand of them at best. So we could take them out easy, but we don't. Well, why not? Because we don't know. Most people don't know that the world is run by a type, or they might sort of lightly infer it, but they don't really follow through. They've never thought about it deeply.
Do you buy the argument that the world's run by Jews?
No, I'm. Do you really want to know?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
I'm very much of the Jesse Sabot school. Jessie Sabot. Some people don't. Some people think that she's not. She just makes it all up. I think that she has a worryingly detailed knowledge of the satanic system, which to me accords with what we know about Ephesians, the rulers of the darkness of this world. Spiritual wickedness in high places. The idea that the world has been that Satan is the god of this world, and various of his kind of junior princelings have got these patches. The Prince of Persia and whatever, they have the different. And in the same way, the followers of Satan, the human followers, the people who practice what's known as the old religion. In other words, the same religious practices that the Canaanites engaged in, that the Phoenicians engaged in with child sacrifice and so on. The gods had different names, but they had the same. They had same yearnings for human flesh, and particularly children being sacrificed. They feed on that, because I suppose killing an innocent child is an affront to God, and affronting God is what they really want to do all the time. So I think, per Jessie Sabot's various podcasts about this, that different parts of the world have been divided into different jurisdictions, and that they're all they're all devil worshippers, Satanists, followers of the old religion, but some of them kind of have the Jew badge. Some of them have the Freemason badge. Some of them have the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons. In other words, you've got representatives of Satanism in all the different religions. The Catholic Church obviously has got fairly healthy representation. I mean, I would say that the people who call themselves Jews probably punch above their weight in terms of the patches that they control. For example, the entertainment industry and the movie industry. That's quite a big deal. The banking industry as well is pretty heavily infiltrated in that school. But no, I don't think that, insofar as the word Jews has any meaning anyway, because it's Talmudic Judaism is quite a modern religion actually, which I think we can probably agree doesn't really have an awful lot to do with the Old Testament. I mean, even though the number of Jews who are actually interested in the Torah, I think, is not as great as I think Zionist Christians might imagine. Do you see what I'm saying here? So you've got different criminal gangs. I think it's too simplistic to blame the Jews. And also, I feel very uncomfortable given that, I've always found that my Jewish friends have punched above their weight in terms of being funny and erudite and stuff. I mean, you could argue that that's due to generations of breeding, where they're selected for intelligence and wit and stuff. But what always makes me uncomfortable when people say it's the Jews, and I'm thinking, well, hang on a second. Do you mean everyone in this world who's Jewish? Well, you don't. Sure you mean families like the Rothschilds, obviously. But most ordinary Jews, they're just as victims of this as much as the rest of us.
Well, that's exactly what I was asking, because I do think that it is a little bit of a trope, that it's the Jews thing. It's the same thing as saying safe and effective, because it's very vague and it doesn't really mean anything.
Can I also say that I don't like to spend too much time protesting too much that I don't think it's the Jews, because I think that it is set itself as another chat. The moment you start, the whole debate is so fraught that you can't even. It's a minefield where you can't even say, I don't think it's totally the Jews, without then being accused of being naive, victim of a psyop, dishonest, or whatever. If I thought it was the Jews, I would say it. I mean, even if it meant being killed. But my researches so far suggest to me that no, there is. It is also the Vatican. It is also the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, and it is definitely the Freemasons, and it is probably the old Italian bloodline, papal bloodline families. So that's my answer. That's my best answer at the moment.
Well, I mean, I look at it also like this: when movements like Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQ movement and all that blame whites for everything that's wrong in the world, I see it as the same thing. When you blame Jews for everything that's wrong in the world, what you're effectively doing is promoting them to superhero status, that they have this ability to control everything and everyone, and it pushes you into a perpetual mindset of victimhood.
Do you know what? I kind of don't agree with that argument. I see it in chats where supposedly awake people tell me you really shouldn't credit the Illuminati. Let's call them the Illuminati, or the Cabal, whoever runs the world. You really shouldn't credit them with so much intelligence and power and etc. And I'm going, hang on a second. What? We shouldn't give credit to people who've been running the world for the last 5,000 or 6,000 years. Hold on. Yeah, but hold on. There's an overlap there. Saying white people or Jews, you're looking at one characteristic. A group of globalists or a cabal can be all sorts of different people. Do you follow? Yeah, I do. I'm not sure it's a particularly useful distinction, particularly not in the context of. I mean, if you take William Finck's theories seriously, then it does kind of mean. I mean, I think one has to be modest about this, but it does kind of mean that Christendom is kind of special, because it is descended from actually the people who really were God's chosen people, which is why it's such a very, very tricky thing. Because on the one hand, I like the idea that, hey, yay, I'm one of the descendants of the 12 tribes. At the same time, I'm thinking, hang on a second, that means that I'm the descendant of one of those tribes that God was enjoining to wipe out all the other tribes. And because of my upbringing and your upbringing, it will be the same. We've kind of been taught to feel a bit uncomfortable about that, haven't we? I mean,
well, what you're trying to say is, So what you're trying to say is that the argument that Finck makes is that the Israelites were white, and so therefore the chosen people are white.
Exactly. Also, in some of my other researches, Nimrod. You know about Nimrod? Nimrod was the great hunter who sort of masterminded the Tower of Babel. I think Nimrod may have been black. And he was a baddie. He was a baddie. Now, I don't know whether if I were black, I'd feel good about that or bad. I mean, on the one hand, I'd be thinking he was a badass. And he was a really good hunter, and he had a really good gang of hunters, and they did lots of, they got rid of a lot of the wild beasts which were predating on people at the time. And he was pretty ambitious and cool. And Elgar, Elgar wrote one of his most beautiful pieces of music, which is another thing, by the way. Sorry, skittering around. What is Edward Elgar, doing writing music in praise of one of the most evil people in the Bible? I was at school in Malvern for 10 years of my life, and we were taught to revere Elgar. It's one of the great things. The fact that the Enigma variations were written in the shape of the Malvern Hills, I think. And you're thinking, okay, so he wrote some nice tunes, some jolly patriotic tunes, Pomp and Circumstance and stuff. And then what's he doing? Why was he into Nimrod? And then you start thinking, is everyone who gets to be that famous, are they in the game on some? Have they all paid homage in some way to the old gods? Have they all made the pact?
It's a bit of a segue, but what has been your biggest red pill?
Well, if I'm honest, okay, so my first red pill was the climate change is bollocks red pill. And I spent, that was, but you see, a bit like the normies who've gone back to thinking everything's back to normal after COVID, despite the bombshell, discovering that the entire...
COVID is just a placeholder. The word COVID is just a placeholder. That's all it is.
Yeah, it is. It is, yeah. But then if you use words like plandemic, it just makes you sound like it's like people use the word sheeple. And I'm thinking, no, don't use the word sheeple. It really doesn't... It's not witty. It's not... Anyway. So... I discovered that the entire field of ecology, environmentalism, sustainability, everything to do with that was complete bollocks, which actually, when you think about it, is quite a big deal because that's about half the world's economy and about a third of the world's academic posts. So that was a big deal. But I thought... Well,
it's also the basis of sustainable development.
It's the basis. It is the new religion, actually. So yeah. So I learned all this, and then I kind of... said to myself, okay, well, I've rumbled this massive scam, but obviously all the other things that I haven't investigated, they're all right. All these other branches of science, they're legitimate. Evolution, obviously, that's what happened. So I then had to have my second awakening in the form of the... I feel embarrassed about this because I now realise that Trump is an Apollo-worshipping, Luciferian, bad actor, Zionist, etc. But this stolen election of, what was it, 2020, the stolen election, it wasn't so much that I could see the election being stolen by an incontinent, child-stroking guy whose son was probably being in the pay of China and had some extraordinarily disgusting stuff on his laptop, and the guy who was so unpopular that his minders wouldn't allow him on the campaign trail. It wasn't so much that this guy was allowed to win the presidential election, become so-called leader of the free world. What shocked and appalled me was to see all my media colleagues, the guys who I thought would be in the trenches with you and me, saying, yeah, and the reason Biden won is because he's statesmanlike and popular and whatever lies they made up to explain why this guy, the incontinent loser, won rather than the popular guy. I was thinking, hang on a second, I became a journalist in order to find out the truth because I'm a nosy, but I want to know how the world really works and what's going on. And I'd never make stuff up for an article because I thought that was like a bad thing. That's not what journalists do, or not in the stories anyway. They're not in the movies. They're kind of heroes and they're truth seekers and stuff. And I was that naive. I really thought that was my job too. And when I saw everyone else, all these guys I'd had drinks with over the years and trusted, not doing what I thought was their job, I thought, hang on a second. If my ideas about journalism aren't true, and the media aren't true, what else do I need to question? And I gradually realised that I needed to question everything. So that's how it worked. I think you've got to credit these people. They do a pretty good job, don't they? I mean, they work really hard at it. They think of every angle. They think of every detail. And I kind of have a grudging respect for them, even though, of course, sadly, they're going to burn in hell or freeze in hell, depending on what you think the deal is about hell. They're not going to. Their time in the sun is short-lived. There's a very good psalm. I'm going to learn. My next psalm is going to be Psalm 73, where it talks about this, where the narrator of the psalm says, "Look, I'm really. I know you're great, God, but I'm kind of a bit upset at the moment because I'm looking at these really, really bad people, and they're getting away with murder, and they're rich and they're successful and everything's going well for them." And then later on in the psalm, he goes, "Well, hang on a second. Then I went into the house of the Lord and sought further advice, and I discovered what's going to happen to these people, and it ain't going to be fun." So we should be really, Jerm, we should be praying for these people every day that they may see the error of their ways.
Yeah, what is the moral of the story?
Put thou thy trust in the Lord and be doing good. Dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thou in the Lord, and he shall give thee thy heart's desire. I think that's all you can do. Look, I don't have the man skills to go off grid and get a kind of small holding and milk goats every day. Apart from anything else, my family wouldn't buy it. Because they're not into this kind of thing. I think that Bob is right. You've got to treat all the news as satire, and you've got to assume that everything is a lie. I'm not sure what we can do as individuals other than opt out of this lie system that they've created to manipulate us, and do what you and I do, which is to spread the word, and both forms of word, the word with a capital W, because I think that the more of us that pray to God, the more it. This was another of my recent insights. I've been reading this book, published in the 1880s. I think it's called Earth's Earliest Ages, and it talks about the setup, and it answers a few questions that I've always wondered about. Like, okay, well, how do the rebel angels fit into the time scheme? What was happening before Adam and Eve came on board? And I think what I've worked out is that as John tells us, Satan is the god of this world. I mean, he was a prince. He was that's why he fell. He was probably God's favourite, and his arrogance was his undoing, which is why pride is considered to be the worst of the sins, because it's Satan's sin. And he's good at his game, and he's amassed this army of demons and devils and obviously human supporters, and they're really, really doing pretty well. And although we know God wins in the end, because how could he not? Because he created everything. At the same time, the struggle now is real, and the bad guys are doing pretty well. And the forces of light and goodness, like led by the the archangel Michael, who's the commander of God's heavenly host. They need our help in the form of prayers. It does make a difference, and I think one has to take this stuff seriously. So we need to preach the word with a capital W, but also the word with a lowercase w, which is the truth about the true nature of the world. I think the more people understand, the better equipped they'll be to formulate their own personal strategy for dealing with this craziness, because we've all got different skills to bring to the party, haven't we? I mean, I'm quite good at talking drivel for an hour on a podcast. Others may have different. Yeah, exactly. You too, mate. I mean, it's God has given us this. Imagine, yes, and I'm going to give to James and Jerm the ability to talk rubbish entertainingly for a whole hour or more, and they're going to spread my word. Yeah, we've all got different skills, and that does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
I think that one of the terms I dislike is contrarian, as if one picks a position just because it's in opposition to what everyone else thinks. And that's never been... I always go for what I think is true, even if I've been wrong in the past. But I think that's got to be the mission, to cleave to the truth and adjust your position according to what, once you've weighed it on the scales. If you find that actually there's counter evidence which leads you in a different direction, well then look at that.
But for me, for example, a big red pill for me in the COVID era is how wrong Ben Shapiro actually is when he says facts don't care about your feelings. And I would argue that facts don't really matter. That's being a huge awakening for me, how important narratives and storytelling actually are. And they are the foundation of humanity, not facts or evidence.
Well, I suppose if you it depends on how you define fact. If you define a fact as an embodiment of truth, then obviously facts do matter. But I think I know the sense you're talking about facts. That facts as a kind of as a manipulative device to insert into a narrative to make it more credible. Yeah, I discovered, by the way, I did discover recently an issue that I'm not sure about. I've been reading this very interesting book on artifacts taken from around the world and brought back to museums in the great capital cities of Europe. So I was reading an essay about the Nefertiti bust in the Neues Museum in Berlin. You must have seen it. It's possibly the most beautiful bust ever made. Nefertiti was Akhenaten's wife, and Akhenaten was the rebel pharaoh who decided that everything was all previous religious practice was now going to be altered, and that everyone was going to worship the sun god. And he's sometimes credited with being the first monotheistic world leader, and that and somebody wrote an opera about him, Akhenaten. Anyway, is it right that cultural artifacts should be lifted from places like Egypt and shipped off to countries where ordinary Egyptians can no longer afford the travel or the visas and stuff?
That's interesting.
Well, it's interesting because there's all sorts of complications. Like, it was removed from Egypt in the 1910s, 1920s, and the word demands for its repatriation. And guess who resisted? Who fell in love with it and didn't want it sent back? It being Germany.
Hitler.
Yeah. So you could say this is the bus that Hitler refused to return to its rightful owners. But then you've got further complications, because it turns out that the only reason that this bus was rescued was because changing irrigation practices in Egypt at the turn of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, meant that large areas were going to be flooded. These areas where all these tombs and artifacts were. These tombs and artifacts were about to be destroyed. So there was a rush of archaeologists saying, look, we've got to have a concerted international effort, and we need funding, massive fundings to go in there. So in other words, a lot of this stuff would never have been revealed had it not been for these rich entrepreneurs funding these expeditions. Oh, and by the way, here's one of the main funders of the German exhibition was Jewish. So you've got these different strands of. On the one hand, this stuff will still be underground and would never have been discovered. On the other hand, it comes from their country. So you see what I mean? It's very, very complicated and interesting, and I quite like that. I quite like something where I'm not totally sure what I think.
And just like that, James disappeared. If James doesn't come back, then I will bring this to a close. All right, well, James just vanished. I suspect his connection dropped. But since we were coming in for a landing anyway, I will recommend following James Delingpole, the Deling Pod. It's a great listen. And follow James on X. I forget what his handle is, but look him up, James Delingpole. And hopefully I will get James back in the near future. With that in mind, my name is Jerm. This is Jerm Warfare, the battle of ideas.